the body, travels inside the body. Exploration of that. This child on his Holy Communion. Dressed to the nines. The suit was bought for him. He was brought to a church. He was told to recite some prayers, some eulogy. He hadn't a clue what it meant, what it all meant. He was just following orders, doing what everybody else did. And you could say that he was indoctrinated at an early age. And that's what my performance art practice is about. It's exploring that indoctrination. How much of ourselves are free will, how much of ourselves comes from the outside, is programming, how much of it is instinct. So this was one of my first performance personas, which I was still doing my college course NCAD, 2005 I think. And I had veered off from painting, printing, very classical, into performance art. And why performance art? I think because performance art, well, I wasn't any good at painting. Let's face it, my paintings are dreadful. So, but in saying that, it wasn't the chief reason why I just flipped and went to performance art. Well, the reason was because I couldn't express myself, my inner world or my exterior world through painting. I wasn't any good at it, but I found that performance art offered me that. So I started to do performance video, and then live performance with audience. And I kind of learned as I went along. I didn't really read up any manuals. I didn't really read up about performance artists. I heard names spinning around, but I kept doing my own thing, my own exploration. It wasn't until much later that I kind of went to delve into the history of performance art. So that exploration allowed me to challenge myself, to find some courage as well. Someone once said to me, "Oh, is it the same as acting?" And I went, "No, I would never go up on stage and act. I'd be terrified with script. It's a very different thing." But when I'm faced with an audience, being your authentic self, which I hope I'm being now, is much more easy for me than getting up and pretending, even with a script. So some people might find comfort in that, but I find that absolutely, terrifying. So today, sorry if I'm preambling, it's just thought I'd give you an introduction there. But performance art for me is about the body, is about the audience, it's about exploration, it's about finding that line between fear, fearlessness. It's about asking questions. It's about picking away at some of the tropes or the things that we're brainwashed in, and kind of holding a mirror. Well, a lot of performance artists use mirrors, and I see sometimes this shamanic thing where we're reflecting back in our work, back in society. So I'm just going to tiptoe through the tulips and just show you some of the work I've been doing over the past couple of years, and if anyone wants me to stop and has questions, that's fine. They don't have to be till the very end. It's not that kind of a talk. Okay. So this is a still performance on camera. I guess it's called Marguerite, and it's from a recent workshop I did with La Potion Nostra. Excuse my Spanish, where we delved into image making and image making for the camera, and we had to respond to our environment. And I was very taken with this huge mound of trees, fell trees, and it reminded me of a pyre. And then I've been doing some research on a nun from the 14th century, French nun, who was burned at the stake for being a heretic because of her writings. And I think that's an early example of someone who's queer and sees the world in a queer way, and the world isn't very kind to them, you know. So I named this piece after her to kind of honour her queerness. Okay, so that's kind of very recent work. During the pandemic, because I couldn't perform to an audience so much, I had to kind of think of ways of keep doing what I was doing. So I found this plinth in the Phoenix Park, but quite by accident, but it seemed to be disguised for some reason, with all these beautiful palm trees waving and whatever. So I went up to read it, and it actually was a plinth that the last Viceroy of Ireland used to stand on. So he's been removed, nice, quietly removed, and they did all this lovely planting around it too. So for me, that kind of was like, that summed up Ireland and where we're at, you know, how we still can't face certain histories and how we kind of decorate them and hide them. So I decided to do like a guerrilla performance. So I went up one day with my little bag of tricks, keeping an eye on the gardeners. And when the opportunity arose, I climbed up onto the plinth and did my poses, L statue. Statue-like. But it was funny because the gardeners soon came around in their little tractors and kind of went around me, you know, wondering what the hell I was doing. So I guess that piece of work is about space, who owns it and who can do what in space, public space, and how public is it really. And it's also about our colonial history. And I still think someone said, or maybe it was Sinead O'Connor said, Ireland's like a teenager, like, you know, unruly teenager. We haven't quite matured yet. We're still kind of figuring it all out, you know. So that was a little bit about social distancing. I took the name because it was going around at the time, and because of the pandemic, and everyone was talking about viruses. But I suppose you could call colonialism and empire kind of viruses as well, and spread, but also social distancing because of the class system and the difference, the pyramid structure, and the difference between, you know, those under the stairs, those at the top, so to speak. So it was like a class system, which, you know, it's funny, even though we're a republic, I think our class system is still, it's still there. It's more subtle than maybe in the UK, but it's still there. This video, again, it was called Queering the Landscape, and it was done in the Burren, in my persona. I wanted to take that idea of the Irish postcard, the red-haired boy, the donkey, all that kind of, those tropes, and kind of turn it on its head, twist it. And so that we could maybe view our environment, view Irishness in a kind of, our nationality, view identity in a kind of different way, because we've all become so accustomed to thinking of Irishness and identity in such a saturated, kind of predictable fashion. So I wanted again to look at the Burren and kind of make it a kind of alien landscape, and I was a visitor, you know. So in a way, I was visiting my own country, visiting my own nation, visiting my own identity. The video was edited with, the burren. I was wearing these shoes, very unstable, and the landscape. I said maybe this is where Irish dancing comes from, because people walking across the burren in shoes. It's very, you know. So this lovely accident happened, you know. So when I was videoed, we concentrated on that, you know, on that. So these happy accidents and kind of revisiting the environment, the landscape, the body in the landscape, and creating something anew. I was also thinking of David Bowie's Ashes to Ashes video, if you remember him walking on the beach. Yeah. Okay. Anyone who chose a word, if they'd like to have a look at that word, and maybe we can discuss. Anyone want to shout out their word that they found?
I've got
entertainment. Entertainment, okay. Is performance art entertainment? It can be, but that's not the aim. I think entertainment's a byproduct sometimes, you know. And there's nothing wrong with entertainment. There's nothing wrong with humour. But it's not the goal for me anyway. But it's okay. Yeah. Anybody else want to call out a word there?
Authentic selves.
Authentic selves. So for me, that's what performance art really is. It's that search, that internal search for the authentic self and one's relationship with that. The inside and the outside world, and I think every performance artist, I can't speak for everybody, but I think that's probably at the heart of performance art, is finding that authentic self and bringing it into the real world. Yeah, it's a big part of performance. Yeah. Embodiment. Embodiment for me is when I think it comes into play when I've done site-specific work, like Kilmaine and Goal, or at the casino in Marino, where the place is charged, you know, and you one cannot ignore that. You have to kind of take it on board. And have a conversation with it, and one's also when you're working site specific, you're having a conversation with the weather, you know, the smells, all these things, you know. So you're not going to somewhere with an idea. You have to kind of be open to having a conversation with all these different elements, because they are actually all part of the performance. As are an audience, you know, they are like the alchemy that make the thing.
Durational?
Yeah, I was really against durational performance, because I fucking hated that. Like, I didn't want to sit in my own piss for like 4 or 5 hours. You know, I just wanted to, you know, go in, get the job done, and go. But then you find that sometimes the learning is that some performances need time. They get stronger with time. That time is like it's like a color, or it has to be used when needed. So I think when I was doing a piece called Love Letter in Kilmainham Jail, and I was kissing the wall, I started on the bottom and I went up and up and up, and I left kind of lipstick traces all the way, and I filled the wall. That took a couple of several hours, and I could have just did the bottom line and just left and walked away. But I think, filling the wall and having the audience there watching you fill the wall over time, that's where time was really integral to that piece. It seemed to gain more weightiness, even though it was the same gesture. It was just one gesture that was repeated again and again and again and again and again and applied. It was because of the time it took. Yeah. So time can be very important when considering piecework. Yeah. But we did a set of nice pieces where we just said you have like 3 minutes to do a performance, and we had 20 people doing 3-minute performances one after the other, and that can be just as valid, So it's all context. Yeah. Cool. This is Studio 6 in MART Galleries, and it's a piece called Shall We Dance? And I think we did an event there called, for Valentine's night, called Livestock. And it was looking at all the different artists responding to Valentine's and broken hearts, romance, la la la. And I did this durational piece, blindfolded, with music. I use music and sounds a lot. The music were songs taken from, going back to the 1920s right up to today, So it was a way of playlist. They were all love songs. My idea was that everybody has a love song. People say, oh, I hate love songs, but everybody has some song that triggers them. And I put them on a playlist, gathered them, and I had the music playing, so randomly going from all over. I blindfolded myself. I put up a sign that said, "Shall we dance?" ? And I just stood there in the room waiting. And I could have been waiting there for 4 hours, which would have been fine. But as happened, people started to come, take me by the hand and lead me around the room and dance. And I could tell that it was specific songs. A person would come to me when a specific song played. And I knew that this song meant a lot to them. And I also found out very quickly that it wasn't really me they were dancing with. I was just a vessel. So that piece turned out to be really, really powerful. I did it a number of times. I did it in Live Collision Festival, in the space upstairs in Project Art Centre, which is a massive space, and I said, this is not going to work. But with the lighting designer, when one thing in performance art, we're always doing things that are cheap, so when you get a crew, it's like amazing. So he lit the whole space, like a dark disco ball and everything, and then he just spotted me, so he brought in everything. So that was brilliant. And it worked really well there. And again, I had a number of reactions. This is where I think the relationship with the audience is really interesting, because when people are looking at me blindfolded, they have they feel like they can come up to me, and take me by the hand and do whatever. And for some people, they might come up very cocky and kind of, it's a bit of fun, whatever. But once they're on the stage with me, some part of them, the penny drops that, oh, I've entered the performance and all eyes on me. I am part of the performance. And I could literally feel that in someone's body. Someone who started off very cocky, all of a sudden, I could feel that now they're feeling in it, Other things that happened to me were people who got quite emotional. I had one person crying on my shoulder through a song. I had another person who was flipping me around the room, you know, really giving it welly, you know. And I thought that was really surprising because they weren't really caring for my safety, you know. It's like they were having a great time. So again, it was a variety of responses from that piece, you know. I think, yeah, I kind of approach things like that. I'm never, like today, I don't know whether one person is going to show up, or 5 or 40. And I have to be okay with all those scenarios. Like I've kind of ended up performing just for myself. But in saying that, there's a thing called witness, which I've been using a lot lately. So it's not like theatre. Theatre needs bums on seats and they need whatever. But actually, a performer, I'm not saying that you don't need an audience, but what I'm saying is there's always something watching. And what is that thing that's watching? So I call that the witness. So even though there might be no bodies around or public, if I am doing something, say in the landscape or out, like even if it's the cows or the weather or the environment, I get the sense that I am being seen. And what is that's seeing? You know, it's very deep. Yeah, this piece I did in the casino in Marina, which is a big old kind of folly, Victorian, maybe even earlier than Victorian folly. And we did it, we were told we couldn't use it inside, you know, because I think we all wanted to, as performance artists, it was part of Dublin Live Art Festival, I think 2015, but we couldn't use the inside, you know. It was too precious, they were worried about public, so we all responded different ways around the casino. I did a little bit of research, and what I found out is like this casino was once just part in the big garden, and there was a huge house, and there were tunnels that went from the house underground to the casino, so that people couldn't be seen. The gardeners couldn't be seen, the cooks couldn't be seen, so things would just arrive, you know, and gardeners would pop up willy-nilly, kind of. So what I thought about is were the people who weren't allowed into this structure, like this temple-like structure, that, you know, all the workers, the people who contributed to the lives of the people who owned the house, but they weren't allowed in the house. So what I did was I preambled around the structure in this very slow circle, in this sashin kind of cloth, which probably a lot of people, you know, was thinking of the coal man or, you know, people delivery back in the 18th century, you know. So very, very basic clothing. And it was the worst August day ever because it thundered and rained and lightning, and we was there for 3 hours, and we could have abandoned it, but it just felt like cheating a little bit. So, and again, it's like that, let's see what the body does, you know. So, yeah, so the body got very cold and very angry. But in this, I walked up to the steps of the Marino, the casino in Marino, and it's done. There are lots of reliefs and a lot of pagan symbolism. And one of the things that I focused on was Pan, which is the god of joy, frolicking, and a bit mischievous. So I read out this poem about Pan, which is called The Death of Pan. And it seemed to me relevant because it was maybe it referred to the people who lived there, but also that societal structure that is gone, you know, that used to, the Irish aristocracy, the ascendancy, you know, that used to play and have fun. And this, I was in the very centre of their dream world, you know, but it was no longer there. So it was referring, the poem, and that was referring to the environment. So when performing, that's what I like to find out as much about a site as possible, because from that research will come ideas. That's myself just outside the casino. That's the video I just showed there. Okay. Dublin Live Art Festival, I think it was the last one, it was 2015. This was the Grange Gorman, and it was a performance through the grounds. I didn't know what I was going to do. Again, I did a number of site visits, and as a Dubliner, I never knew what was behind those high walls. So then to see all this land and this open space, I was really surprised. And then there was the asylum itself. But what I noticed is that we were on high ground, and then we looked across the Liffey Valley, across, and I could see Guinness's, and I could see St. Patrick's Tower, which is a giant windmill. And for some reason that sparked Don Quixote. And, in Don Quixote, when he's, Cervantes' story where he's fighting the windmill, and the whole thing is he mad? Or is the windmill really a dragon? And so I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm on the grounds of an old asylum. What is insanity? What's sanity? There was a lot of people in Victorian times who were put away because they were insane, but we probably would have found them today just forward thinking. And there was all those things where husbands were allowed, had the permission to put away wives who were disagreeable or women who were disagreeable. So there was a lot of people in there who probably shouldn't have been there. So I want to honour this site and refer to Cervantes by doing this here. I had this made up by a friend of mine. So it's straitjacket-like, but it's the arms and the legs are extra long. And it's actually very hard to walk in, but that's okay because that creates a certain way of moving. So when you're moving through an area over time, it's almost like very, very careful. It's a dance. It's like a choreography. The mirror was, I would stop, and anytime I would sense a person or people, I would look in their direction and try and catch their reflection. And again, it was that to say, well, this could be you. It could be you could be embodying this. You could be in this costume. You could be doing this. Yeah. So that was that. I don't know if anyone have been to Fort Dunree up in Donegal. It's beautiful. It's an artist residency, and it's an old military post, and it's just full of these things that have been left lying around like giant guns, very machismo. Again, part of our history, and the site. It was an outlook for, first of all, for the Spanish. The English were looking for the Spanish Armada to come in. And later on, during World War I, they were looking for German U-boats from that point. But I had brought this gold dress, and what I did is I just started to wear it around the environment, and hang it on the gun, and it was a gesture. It was to kind of balance the masculine power with the feminine, and just to see what happens, just to kind of start conversations, yeah. And I guess feel like I could belong in that space. This body could belong in that space, in its own way. This site specific. This was a Livestock Performance Art Platform, which I did in 2015 in 12 Henrietta Street. So it's an old Georgian mansion, and like that, there was a couple of performances. We were all asked to choose sites within the house, and I kind of chose the kitchen because I always feel the kitchen is the heart of a home. It's the most sociable room, and I like the energy in that particular room. This was a performance where I basically sat at a table covered in a white tablecloth, and I had a big white cake and a bottle of red wine, and I stared at the cake for an hour. And every now and again, I would take a glass of red, and I would. So it was one of those performances that was interesting because over time I got drunk.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I had to ask myself about that, but I think, well, that's okay. I gave permission for myself to get drunk. So after an hour or so, the cake naturally kind of started to fall in on itself, which was really interesting over time again, you know. But there comes a time when the bottle's empty, I'm quite pissed, and I stand up and I just bang my head into the cake. Now inside the cake I had made, especially because inside the cake is all red, so it was all oozing red sponge and goo and jam and everything. So when you hit it, it kind of looks like blood, you know, and it spills out all over to the tablecloth. But when I stand up, I mean, I had this lovely white crisp starched shirt. When I stand up, I'm naked. And I guess what I'm saying there is about presentation. And especially in a house like that, and being the 18th century, the Georgians was all about stiff upper lips, you know, presentation of one kind of itself. And then just beneath the surface, there's a totally other different thing going on, you know. So, and it's about, as bodies and people, we're navigating that all the time. There's a multitude of things happening, but it's how to present that in live work. So, and I call this, like it was like a metamorphosis in that I climbed on top of the table, smeared the cake on myself, and I gathered the tablecloth around me, and I became something else, some kind of other creature that I could inhabit. But in a way, it was after releasing all that kind of desire, because the cake, the drink, everything was about desire as opposed to starch, stiff, restricted. So I gave in to desire. So it was that tension. Over time, it was like playing with that tension, which eventually alcohol kind of allows you to, you know, to do. This next piece was done in Lisbon in 2016, and it's called The Pilgrim. There's a gallery called Platform Revolver, and it's beautiful. It's up there's 4 floors, and there's these wonderful marble staircases. And I spent a week working with a Portuguese artist there and seeing what the similarities were between Ireland and Portugal. We've both got a strong Catholic history. We've both got icons. There's lots of icons. I taught about then our pilgrimage and then ritual that we share, like Croagh Patrick here in Ireland. So I decided that I really liked the staircase, and I was going to use the staircase. And I was thinking, if you want to go staircase to heaven, you know. I should have had that song playing, actually. So I started at the bottom on the 4 floors, and these candles were actually I bought in a candle shop. The same candle shop had been there for 400 years, and they were Easter chickens. So they're little Easter chickens. So I went up to 4 floors holding the candles on my knees. One of these are things like a performance art. Someone said to me, another performance artist, kind of famous Irish performance artist, said to me, "Oh my God, your knees are going to really hurt you. Why don't you wear some knee pads, you know?" And I was like, yeah, but then that would be something else. And no, yes, I did love to have wearing the knee pads, but the actual execution would have changed. The response would have changed, and so I didn't use the knee pads. So I went up there was a thing like when your hands are out like that, I found out that your body, you can't use your hands, you know. So everything goes to those 2 little points on your knees.
So your whole body weight is on those two little points on your knees. So when you get up to about your third floor, each movement on your knees is excruciating because you have a couple of, pounds just focusing. So what happened then is I found ways of sitting on the stone and kind of moving up on my arse to get up the fucking steps, But this was really interesting. It was a byproduct, but it was actually really, really interesting, and it made for a very interesting performance. And also, what happened is that over time, because there was different performances on each level, everybody passed me during the night. Everyone passed me, and by the end of the night, when I was coming up, everyone was on the top floor looking down over me, And I could see all these, the classical ceilings in churches where the angels go around, the cherubs, the faces. So it was a little bit like that. It was like they were all looking down at me. And then I knew that they were all on my side. They were all willing me to fucking finish, So I finished. So I made it to the top in the end. But that was, there we go there. That's just the last room. But it's lovely because people stayed with that piece till the end. People felt a compulsive feeling to stay there till the end, and I have to see this person make it,
Did the candles ever blow out?
The candles never blow, but it would have been fine if they had. There is no. You have to leave a space for surprise. For magic, or some people call it mistakes, but you just have to look at them in a different way and incorporate them in your performance, because people have asked me to do, I really like that performance, can you do it here? And I've done it somewhere else, and they went, it wasn't the same time as you did it there, and I went, yeah, but that's theatre, that's the space I'm doing it in is different, it calls for different things, different responses, so. Yeah. This was back in Kilmainham jail, and this was the Kissing the Wall, a love letter. The ideas of this came from Oscar Wilde's monument grave. I don't know if he's actually buried there in Paris. They have this beautiful monument built, and when people came, they wanted to leave a token. They wanted to kind of have some kind of relationship. So over years and decades, people would kiss the beautiful marble. And so his whole marble shrine was covered in kisses. And that to me had a profound effect. And when I was asked to do this piece in Kilmainham, and I was looking around, I said, my God, Kilmainham, the weightiness of it, how am I going to do a performance here? And then I just thought, you know what? Because we think about Kilmainham as we always think about the revolutionaries, but what I learned during one of from the guides is about there was children as young as 8 who were put in cells, and women and people for just stealing a silk handkerchief or a potato, so it was all those people that I was thinking of being, and the other thing was they had a candle. They were given a candle. The candle had to last you 3 weeks, and it was for light and heat. So this, I thought, oh my God, what can you do for those? How can you represent those people? And I said, maybe some kind of gesture, like a kiss, an embrace, just to acknowledge their existence and their pain. And so that, I thought about the Oscar Wilde grave, and I just thought that's what I'll do, because Oscar was, he was also put in a Victorian jail, and he was never the same when he was released. So it all kind of tied up. So I kissed the wall. And the funny thing about this performance is my back was to the audience, so I never knew if there was anyone there. There could have been nobody there. There could have been one person there. There could have been 40 there. And because it was over a night, that was true at different times. Sometimes there was nobody there. Sometimes there was 40 people trying to look in the door. So it changed over the night. But again, it was one of those performances of by the time I was finished, I was on a ladder and I was on the top. And I finished. When I finished, there was the cell was full of people. I could hardly move, and so people had been wandering around all night, and they had been looking in and seeing my progress. But again, they stayed because they wanted to see this end, you know. So that was a really nice. Kilmainham Jail is goal is awesome. I had to go back the next day. I had to wash down the walls and remove all the kisses. That's the other thing about being a performance artist. Yeah, you set up and then you have to remove, like you've never been there. I really wanted this wall to stay. And when I came with a bucket and mop to wash it down, there was a school tour and there was about 30 girls, teenage girls, in the room, all taking selfies, you know. But I thought that was wonderful, and I thought, oh, they should keep this. But no, anyway, I had to scrub down the wall, and it never existed, so it's just it's okay as well. This was a performance I did in the basement of the Workmen's Club. In Spanish, I was flying on Aer Lingus or something. You know those awful. You've nothing to read, and they have those their own publications. And there was a story about a man in Seville who lived in Cadiz, and his family lived in 12 in his family. They lived in one room, and they used to have a curtain. His mother and father had a curtain to separate from the children. So when they were lovemaking, in Spanish there's a term called the whispers of love. And I thought, oh, that's nice. I'll use that. So Live Collision commissioned me to do a piece for their festival. And I wanted to work with that title. And I worked with an artist called John Freeman, an American artist. And basically we chose the Workmen's Club's the toilets in the basement. I don't know if anyone are familiar with those, but we turned it into an installation so that when you walked in, there was a kind of blue light. And there was also a soundtrack. We had a very bass, very high soundtrack of, I call it pornscape. So I'd taken little bits of porn, found porn off the internet and just amalgamated them into a pornscape. Myself and John were both naked, and we basically stared at each other for 3 hours. We just locked eyes at each other for 3 hours. So when you entered the space, one thing was the smell. There was the smell. It wasn't working. People could go to the bathroom, by the way, and some people did, because the club was open, so people went in and out during the night. And some people didn't. They came upon you. They didn't know there was a performance. They didn't know what the hell was going on. So there was a lovely tension there where you had to stay very perfectly still while this is happening. And the idea was that me and John, every now and again, without removing the eye contact, there would be a small gesture of either myself leaning my head on his heart or something. There would be a small gesture, but long periods of nothing. And the idea, it was kind of a response to all social media, apps, personas, chasing that, what exactly are you chasing, Is it just sex? Is it companionship? What are you chasing? And I think, bottom line, I think people are just looking to connectedness. So the stillness through this kind of loud sounds pornscape, it was like the calm side the storm, and that's what I was trying to get across. So it was very site specific to that place, and it got also because two gay men, there's a whole history there of cruising in toilets, and before the change in law, toilets were places where gay men met and socialised in a way, and everything else you know. So it's kind of bringing that kind of history into the performance as well. Yeah. So I'm just tying up now. This was my last performance, which I did on Harold's Cross, MART Harold's Cross, and it was to the street. Their gallery has a big kind of door, you know, one of those metal doors that opens up, and I wanted it to open up and kind of perform then to the street. Again, a bit like for yourselves today, when people walked in, I was already in my persona as such. So this was a performance to the street, and inside the gallery. I had this huge round mirror which I got specially made, and I found out I wanted it really, really, really thin, super thin, but there's a legal requirement for a mirror to be a certain thickness, you know. And so that had funny consequences, I'll tell you in a minute. So as I moved through the curtain and onto the street with the mirror, I moved around through the crowd, trying to catch, again, people's reflection, you know, and to bring the audience into the work, you know, and they completed the work, the performance. The mirror, again, I brought back into the space. I lay down, and then I proceeded to look at my reflection, kind of obsessively, and then I started to bang my head onto the mirror, you know. Now my intention was to break the mirror, but this mirror wasn't breaking. So I banged my head harder and harder and harder, and it's one of those things in performance where you kind of, it's a health and safety, it's a curator's nightmare when, health and safety, but I felt like the work needed that, because the sound of me banging went throughout the space and was just made a really powerful sounding, and I guess the audience was wondering how far I was going to go and how far I was going to push it. But eventually I just exhausted myself and I just kind of collapsed, and that was that. That was my last performance there.